Well, Senator Leahy is talking about a Truth Commission, and he's someone that really gave me enormous assistance in the past, and it's one of the stops I'll be making this week in D.C. I did testify, of course, to the Truth Commission in Guatemala, and the case is in there as one of the illustrative cases. I've also been many times to document it to the United Nations, and we had a trial in the Inter-American Court against the Guatemalan government, and I'm happy to say that we got a very heavy sentence against the Guatemalan government in 2000. The court is just now insisting that the third leg of the sentencia be carried out, which is to start prosecutions. So I go down to testify on Friday with all my CIA files. I think the most important thing was bringing the CIA to justice. It's called accomplice to murder, or murder for hire. I've been trying in the US court system for the last 13 years. I filed that civil rights suit in '96 here since I couldn't get anyone to prosecute. It finally got thrown out with all the Guantanamo cases. You cannot sue for torture right now. It's completely blocked in the courts unless Congress takes action. But now that I've exhausted my legal rights here, I get to go to Spain or Belgium or wherever under universal jurisdiction, which is also the next stop. If I can't do it here, I'll do it there. But I'd like to see what Senator Leahy's able to do. I have huge admiration for him. Just by way of footnote, one of the former prosecutors in my case, Dr. Julio Arango, who testified in Costa Rica for me, last week died in a tragic car accident at 4 in the morning on a rural country road. Human rights people like Dr. Arango don't drive alone on rural country roads at 4 in the morning, so I assume that was the first assassination. You may be hearing from me asking for protection and for witnesses and emergency calls and so on and so forth. We're about to go back and do it again. Everardo was captured in '92 just as the first President Bush went out. Almost everything I've described tonight happened under Bill Clinton. Hillary Clinton tried to assist me and was told at the last minute by the National Security Council that she should butt out. She was only a first lady. I'm going to try to visit people in her office this week too. There's one sheet of paper, the million-dollar question, right? Did President Clinton know or not, from the CIA files? And there's one sentence at the top that says, the president is ballistic about this, and the rest of the page is blacked out. My opinion is that the CIA does what it wants and just doesn't tell the president or the Intelligence Committee in the House or in the Senate. I think that it's a third branch of the government, it's a secret branch of our government, and it's under no controls. Yeah, why do we use torture if it doesn't work? Well, my personal opinion is torture is just plain stupid. You know, you get Niagara Falls, there may be a needle in the haystack there somewhere, but have fun finding it. To wit, we haven't captured Osama bin Laden yet, to wit. You get tons and tons of information if you hurt someone badly enough, some of it true, most of it false. What I think it is, it's a measure of terror. It's a form of communication to the general population saying, get down, don't participate or you're next. You know, look at some of the techniques that have been used to make people turn themselves in. We've been going and picking up people's wives and kids and leaving a note on the door saying, come turn yourself in if you want to see your family again. Now, how illegal is that? I was somewhat amused to see in that part of the CIA file that the Iraqi wives and kids tended to be really uncooperative and kind of feisty, which more power to them. But yeah, I think it's a message of terror. It's a threat to everybody else, and in Guatemala it worked very well. Well, I'm still kind of annoyed, right? I hate to admit that's a motivating factor, but it is one. Also, you know, when I first went to Guatemala in '78, just as everything was starting to go really crazy, and I went back to all the refugee camps in Mexico in '84, and I was talking to people that were the only survivors of their entire villages, that had watched their grandchildren being disemboweled by military people, right? I mean, just horrifying stories that were later documented. I mean, those are the mass graves being exhumed even now by forensic people who are under death threats. But also in '85, I was down there when the Grupo de Apoyo Mutuo was just formed, the GAM, which is like the Mothers of the Plaza de Mayo. And I got there just after, they were a year old, and I got there a week after 2 of their founding members had been killed. Hector was one of the few men who had founded the organization, and was seized in broad daylight during Easter week and thrown out dead the next day in the city square. And they killed him with a blowtorch and crushed his skull and torn out his tongue and ruptured his liver. I mean, just horrifying injuries. And Rosario Godoy de Cuevas, whose husband had been head of the student union when the entire student union was taken away at the university, they were student council leaders. And they were underground. It was top secret who was in the student council that year. They never came back, but Rosario was under death threats all of Easter week because she gave Hector's funeral address. And her baby got sick, so she took her 19-year-old brother, and they drove down the street to the pharmacy and were found dead in a car way outside the city at the end of the day at the bottom of a ravine with 3 broken necks. And we started interviewing, and the women were all saying, the women that could talk, were saying that they'd seen Rosario in the morgue and she had bite marks and cigarette burns across her breasts. And the U.S. Embassy said, oh no, it was just the marks from a tragic car crash and definitely no human rights violations here. But an elderly nun came forward and said, I'm just going to talk because I was a teacher at the Colegio Belga with Rosario. I knew her as a kid and I knew her as a teacher. And when I went to the house for the funeral, for the wake, the brother and Rosario were in their coffins like good Christians with their arms crossed, and the baby was lying with his hands palms up. And she went around the room insisting on an explanation, and finally someone said, the phone hasn't stopped ringing with death threats against the last surviving son. Don't say anything, just go look at the baby's hands. So she mustered her courage, went up to the coffin, flipped over the baby's hands, and his fingernails had been pulled out. That was my first example of what could be done to a woman who just was asking for her husband to be turned over to the courts of law. I thought that would be the end of the Grupo de Apoyo Mutuo, and so did everyone else. It was just like, no one could survive that and still get together. That was 2 killings in 1 week. But that Friday, they were all out in front of the National Palace, full force. All the indigenous women had walked barefoot out of the mountains through all the military checkpoints with their kids on their back. They were in front of the National Palace, hundreds of them, with banners with Hector and Rosario's photos, throwing flowers, banging pots and pans, and screaming for their loved ones to be returned. So I spent most of the year doing accompaniment work and going up into the rural areas, the most remote rural areas, trying to get human rights testimonies and stuff, and it's like, I don't think I have it very hard, actually. I'd say life is pretty cushy for me. 2 places, ironically enough. One's Germany. I'm the first person in my family to set foot in Germany since the 30s. That caused quite a bit of uproar when I went to a universal jurisdiction conference not long ago in Berlin. And because Nuremberg happened, I was thrilled and impressed and really overwhelmed with the positions all the young Germans were taking on human rights issues and the courage with which they were taking it on. As much as I would fight for anyone's First Amendment rights, if you say in Germany that the Holocaust didn't happen, you will go to jail. And there's a level of courage behind that that I really have to admire. The other place is watching people like the members of B'Tselem and the Refuseniks in Israel getting hauled off to jail. No one's giving them any money, no television shows up, nobody even knows they exist really. But they're out there and they're doing it. When we have war crimes trials here for Cheney, Gonzalez, Bush, Obama's saying he can't do it, and I read that parentheses now. We have to make it safe for him to be able to do that. When there are war crimes trials and the CIA stuff is broken open and reformed, we can fix it. It's a matter of political will, and we think of ourselves as too high and mighty to ever have ourselves be on trial for war crimes. That just can't be. We need to humble down a little bit, and we need to do our homework like the Germans have. We need to do it right. And we can, but the answer is Nuremberg.